Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. My name's Amber and I upload beauty and true crime content. If that's the type of videos that you like to watch, then why not hit that subscribe button and come along and join my little family. And if you're already part of the family, then make sure that notification bell switched on just so you're notified of whenever I upload a video. Why not give me a thumbs up and leave me a comment down below. And now we can get into today's Missing Monday. So today's case is an interesting one from the UK. It is a case of a missing schoolgirl who has now been missing for over 20 years. So today we're going to be talking about where is Ruth Wilson. Ruth Wilson is a British teenager from Beckworth near Docking in Surrey, England. She disappeared on the 27th of November in 1995, 1976 in Newport. Once discharged from the hospital, Ian and Nesta took their beautiful baby girl Ruth home to a picturesque 17th century cottage located on Wunham Lane. When Ruth was 4 years old and her sister Jenny was just a few months old, her mother Nesta died. Ruth was told as a child that her mother's death was through an accident and that her mother accidentally died due to a fall down the stairs. But Nesta's death certificate actually recorded her death as suicide. At the time that Ruth originally went missing, it was actually unbeknownst to the family that she'd found out what had actually happened to her mother, and Nesta's death certificate actually states that she died by hanging on the 10th of December in 1982. There are many possible reasons why Ian, Ruth's father, may have lied to his children about the way their mother died. The most probable theory is that the two girls were very, very young at the time, and maybe they would not have understood the way that Nesta had died, and they probably wouldn't have understood the concept of suicide. And others believe that Ian did not want the children to grow up and believe that their mother had committed suicide because she was unhappy, and she didn't want them to question whether this was their fault or not, which I think is quite a reasonable explanation as to why he didn't explain it to her. I mean, she was still only a teenager at the time when she did find out what had happened to her mother. So Ruth's father met Karen I. Bowerman in the last quarter of 1983 in Surrey. At the time, Ian was working as the head of a school science department and Karen was the deputy head of a primary school. Although Ruth had suffered a traumatic childhood by losing her mother so early in her life, she did grow up to be a very accomplished and smart young woman. Ruth enjoyed reading, going on bike rides and music. She played the electric guitar and the piano. Ruth also worked a Saturday shift in a music shop in the nearby area of Dorking, and she earned additional money by also babysitting for numerous local families. Alongside all of this, Ruth still found time to revise and study her A-levels in biology and chemistry at the Ashcombe School sixth form. Ian, her father, became a local parish councillor sometime in Ruth's childhood, and during this time Ruth took a real interest in visiting the local church of St Michael's. Here Ruth would frequently be found playing the handbells or the organ or singing in the church choir. Those who knew Ruth would describe her as a smart, busy and normal teenager. In terms of family life, Ruth's father described how Ruth seemed to have a happy family life and would frequently call her stepmother Karen mother. All in all, Ruth was just a typical teenager. She had a lot of hobbies and a small, close-knit group of friends who all described her as quirky. Catherine Marr, who was a very close friend of Ruth, disclosed how around October 2005 Ruth began to question her mother's death, and she became suspicious that it wasn't all as she'd once been told. She'd started to ask questions around what had actually happened when her mother died, and she'd become fixated on the idea that her mother's death was not what she'd been told by her father. Catherine was due to move to Sheffield in South Yorkshire, and Ruth had asked if she could come and live with her. Ruth went missing a few weeks after Catherine moved, and Catherine's mother recalled that Ruth had slept over not long before she disappeared and that she'd been adamant she didn't want to go home. Ruth did not explain why, and Catherine stated that Ruth had talked about running away but never about suicide. Ruth's family had always disagreed with claims that she was unhappy at home. So when Ruth had exhausted all possible leads in her mother's death, she actually decided to take a trip into London, and it was in October 1995 when she boarded a train and went on the hunt for her mother's death certificate. Ruth was able to obtain the death certificate, and this is when she saw suicide by hanging wrote in the death box. It is believed that after the revelation of her mother's death, Ruth began questioning everything her father had told her. Ruth's head started to swim with questions, but the predominant question was why everyone had continued to lie about her mother's cause of death and why her mother committed suicide in the first place. Ruth returned from London with this new knowledge, and she was very angry at her father. She decided to run away to a friend's house called Ben Anderton. Ruth hid in his house for several hours before deciding it would probably be best to return home. On Saturday the 25th of November in 1995, Ruth carried out a typical Saturday routine. She travelled into Dorking where she did her normal music shop shift before heading out for food with her ex-boyfriend Will Kennedy and a mutual friend Neil Phillipson. Both boys later informed the police that Ruth was fine throughout the meal, but then she later offered to pay for the whole meal as a way to remember her by. Ruth then returned home to her family and went to bed. On Sunday the 26th of November in 1995, Ruth was up early and headed to St Michael's Church for handbell practice. After this, Ruth attended the local youth club and met up with her friends. Ruth then decided to return to Will Kennedy's house for some supper. Later that night, Ruth returned back to her home and her family reported that Ruth was in it. Like, she was just normal, she was relaxed, she seemed happy. So on the day of the disappearance, which was Monday the 27th of November in 1995, Ruth woke up early. Her father later told the police that he had an important day at work because Ofsted were going to be in the school to assess it. He also reported that he was very flustered on the morning and that he did remember saying to Ruth that she needed to get out of his way because he was in a hurry. So Ian and Karen left for school and they left fairly early that day, which meant that Ruth and Jennifer were to get the school bus together. But Ruth got dressed and at the very last second she actually informed her sister Jennifer that she wasn't going to get the bus with her. But Jenny wasn't surprised at this because sometimes Ruth didn't always come in for the whole day. You know, she might not have necessarily had lessons the whole day, so she didn't want to go in on the morning when she didn't necessarily need to. She was a little bit surprised, however, that her sister did leave it till last minute to sort of tell her that she wasn't going to be going with her. But apart from this, she left her sister and went to the bus stop and got the bus. So shortly after Jenny did leave for school, Will Kennedy appeared with his car. He offered Ruth a lift to school, but she declined, saying that she would meet up with him later. This was completely out of character for Ruth. She wasn't someone who would usually skip school, so everyone in her family and her friends all expected her to turn up at school later that day. However, she never did. So around 11:30 AM, Ruth took a taxi into Dorking. She spent the afternoon in Dorking Library before she ordered flowers for her stepmother from Thistle's Forest at 257 Dorking High Street. Ruth asked that they not be delivered until the following Wednesday. Around 4 PM, she took a taxi from Dorking railway station to Box Hill. She was dropped off on a bridleway a short way from the Hand in Hand pub, which is now the Box Tree, on Box Hill. Box Hill is a large summit on the North Downs made up of chalk hills which are located in Surrey. Box Hill also was not a completely random place to travel to, as the summit overlooks the town of Dorking. It was therefore a popular viewpoint for young people to hang out. The taxi driver did later explain that he did think that Ruth was acting a little bit strange. He had dropped her off on a bridleway at Box Hill near the pub, but he did distinctively remember that when she hopped out of the taxi, she jumped out and she stood around watching him, like waiting for him to leave. He thought that this was strange because normally when passengers would leave a taxi ride, they would like run off, you know, they'd head straight to their destination. He also found the behaviour strange because that day it was actually heavily raining, so like any normal person would be like, oh my god, like get me to where I need to go, but she didn't. She just simply stood. But he also said that maybe she was looking around for someone else, waiting for someone to come and pick her up. The taxi driver was the last person to see her that has been noted, and that was at 4:30 PM. So later on that night, Ian and Karen become worried when they noticed that Ruth had not been to school and she was not at home. So they decided that they were going to telephone the police and report her as missing. The possibility is, so at the time of her disappearance, Ruth was wearing a red knitted jumper, black velvet trousers, black pixie boots and a small lady's watch on her left wrist. She had a small blue duffel bag with a personal stereo and tape. Liam McCauley, a retired police officer investigating the disappearance, observed that Ruth was dressed to get into another car, implying that a third person may have been involved and that running away seemed a lot more likely than a suicide. He also stated that disappearing completely would be very difficult, and Ruth had disappeared 14 days before the 13th anniversary of her mother's death. So that night, Surrey police decided that they needed to conduct a search, and they did within 100 acres of Box Hill. Sniffer dogs, helicopter, a large group of police volunteers and also heat-seeking equipment was used in the search. However, they could not locate Ruth or even find any evidence to suggest that Ruth had been there. So on the 29th of November, the flowers ordered by Ruth were delivered to her stepmother Karen. The flowers were described by Ian as an expensive bouquet in subsequent report. There was no note attached to the flowers. However, Ruth's friend Catherine interpreted this gesture as a sticking her two fingers up to her stepmother stepmother. Like I mentioned earlier, it has been speculated that the family life wasn't all that was meant to be, and I'm wondering whether, I'm not saying that Catherine knew something, but I'm wondering whether, you know, friends confide in friends. Has Ruth confided in friends that her relationship with her stepmother Karen isn't all it's made out to be, and this bouquet is sort of simply a way of saying, see you later, I'm not coming back? Who knows? So on the 1st of December, 4 days after Ruth initially disappeared, the police did find 3 notes hidden in an overgrown bush that were addressed to her parents. There was one to the best friend and a boy that she was friends with. The handwriting was apparently confirmed as Ruth, but the police never ever released the letters, so people don't know what the notes said. Further investigation around the area where the letters were found led to the uncovering of several empty packets of paracetamol and a half-empty bottle of vermouth, a flavoured fortified white wine. This suggested that the police could be dealing with a potential suicide, yet Ruth's body was not found nearby. Police also could not distinguish if the notes had been left on the day of her disappearance or previously. The reasoning for questioning this is because it did later come out that after speaking to many of Ruth's friends, it uncovered that Ruth did frequently visit Box Hill alone. Friends also told the police that Ruth wasn't doing as well at school as what her parents thought she was, and she'd recently received some bad grades and she was trying to hide the report from her parents. So on the 2nd of December in 1995, 5 days after her disappearance, another large-scale search was organised by Surrey Police and the Fire and Rescue Services, which included 60 volunteers comprising of local members of the public and school friends, colleagues and wardens from the National Trust. The search utilised a police helicopter, tracker dogs and thermal imaging equipment. The search this time involved the Beckworth Quarry end of Box Hill, but again Ruth was not located and there were no further leads that were developed from the search. It was uncovered a week into the investigation by Catherine Marr that Ruth had discovered how her mother really died and highlighted that the date of Ruth's disappearance was close to the time of her mother's anniversary. So Catherine did confide in the police that Ruth did know what had actually happened to her mother, just in case this could aid the investigation anyway. So on the 8th of December in 1995, with no word from Ruth, Ian and Karen made a public appeal on this morning for any further information. They stated that they believe Ruth was still alive but was afraid to come home. Shortly after this appeal, Mark Williams Thomas, the family liaison officer for Ruth's family, highlighted that there was no evidence to suggest that Ruth had been killed or committed suicide. However, Mark did suggest that in his experience, Ruth had probably gone to meet someone and gone away. So police later decided to dispatch officers to Catherine Marr's home in Sheffield to question her face to face about Ruth in the weeks leading to her disappearance. They learned that Catherine had run away from home at a similar time to Ruth, and they even looked in her wardrobe, believing Catherine could have potentially have been hiding Ruth, yet they found no evidence to suggest that she'd ever been there. After numerous appeals, a young girl came forward stating that she knew Ruth and had seen her with a navy suitcase on Reigate Lane. This was 5.3 miles from Box Hill and only 1.7 miles from Ruth's family home. The girl reported this to the police, but unfortunately the girl was unable to identify if it had been that day, the day that Ruth had gone missing, or whether it had been the day before. The police dismissed this eyewitness statement. Many did conclude that they thought Ruth had run away. So on the 6th of October in 1966, Stuart Qualtrough wrote in the People newspaper it was believed that Ruth was spotted on the outskirts of London on Tuesday the 1st of October 1966 after a cable station, Live TV, appealed for help on their missing persons programme. On the first anniversary of the disappearance, a person who was thought to resemble Ruth was captured on CCTV at a Dorking newspaper shop 2 miles from Box Hill. The female teenager was distressed and requested a copy of each of the local newspapers and became visibly upset when she was told one of them was sold out. The newspaper shop owner reported the encounter to the police and saved the CCTV footage. The local newspaper featured reference to Ruth's disappearance. Ruth's parents stated in an article in The Times on January 2nd, 1997 that they believed the girl in the video was Ruth. It was in February 1998, the large supermarket chain Iceland featured Ruth on their Missing Children Milk campaign in a bid to raise more information about Ruth's disappearance. Again in 2006 and in 2008, fresh appeals were made once more in a bid to keep Ruth's fresh in everyone's memory, also to gain more information that may lead to a solid lead. Speaking on the 10th anniversary of Ruth's disappearance, Sergeant Shane Craven, head of East Surrey's police missing persons team, stated that in the weeks following Ruth's disappearance, there were some fairly reliable sightings of her in Dorking area by people who knew her well. Sightings have been reported as far afield as Canada. A Surrey Advertiser article by Rebecca Younger, dated the 9th of December 2008, announced an appeal to mark the 13th anniversary of the disappearance. In this appeal, Surrey police revealed that they were investigating a posting on a MySpace site about a possible sighting in Canada. The missing persons team have stated that they have followed up every single lead. In 2010, Roxy Birch, a close friend of Ruth's at school, appealed on BBC's Missing Live. In 2018, a local newspaper sent out an appeal to anyone who had known Ruth at the time to come forward with information that could shed light on her disappearance. Roxy Birch claimed that Ruth didn't drive and didn't own a passport at the time of her disappearance, which would have made long distance and international travel more difficult. Another friend, Claire Blanard, stated, "My belief is that she had planned to do something. I don't know whether that would be permanent or temporary. I'd like to believe that someone knows what happened." The same year, John Saville, the Chief Superintendent of Public Protection at Surrey Police, gave a review of the case in which he stated, "There are 5 expectations for Ruth Wilson's disappearance: a tragic accident, abduction, suicide, murder, or that she had absented herself to start a new life." In 2018, a documentary was launched titled Vanished, the Surrey Schoolgirl. It followed Martin Bright as he interviewed the friends of Ruth, and the documentary focused on how it was possible for a young 16-year-old to run away with no documents. It was also questioned how Ruth could have possibly got a new national insurance number and visited the dentist without being discovered. The documentary also focused on how Ruth had left without a coat and how this potentially meant that she was expecting someone to pick her up. They also questioned why Ruth had not walked away when the taxi dropped her off and came up with 2 possible reasons. She did not want the taxi driver to see where she went, or she was meeting someone at that spot. Finally, the documentary concluded that if Ruth was going to run away, why had she gone to Box Hill? Surely you would head for a train station or main roads which offer routes out of town. A retired detective on the programme stated that he believes someone in the community knows what happened to Ruth. Operation Scholar was later opened by DCI Alex Geldart, which constantly reviews the case of Ruth. Surrey police have stated that the investigation would also be reopened the minute any new evidence or lines of inquiry come to light. Wow, what a case. So, my thoughts and feelings on this one. Now, I genuinely don't think she met with foul play. I think that, I don't know, so obviously this is just speculation and theory. I do think that there was clearly something going on at home and she was upset. Maybe it's just, you know, teenagers, they have a little bit of a temper tantrum, and maybe she was getting a little bit upset, and then when she found out what happened to her mum, maybe that tipped her over the edge a bit and she just felt like she couldn't be around those people anymore. And I do think that there is a possibility she could have chose to have run away, but I don't think she could have done it on her own, and I do feel like someone did help her. And I think the reason she was looking around when she was stood at where the taxi driver dropped her off was for someone else. There's a lot of leads that point to that direction. I just hope that if she did decide to run away, and that she did run away with someone, that to this day she's living a happy life, and you know, she is happy. If you do have any leads in this investigation, I will leave the contact information below, but apart from that, I'm going to leave this one here. I'd love to know your thoughts and theories on this case though. Let me know them down below, and I shall see you in the next one. Thanks so much for watching. Mwah.
We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas.